Today's learning objectives is going to be to differentiate between a group and a real team and why the distinction matters in today's workplace. We're going to identify common performance blocks in weak teams and qualities that make great teams. We're going to support real team development, inclusion, and effectiveness. Today's agenda, as we just went through, we did our welcome and introduction here, and then we are going to talk about challenges of today's teams, characteristics of weak and great teams, tips for building real teams, a case study, and then we will have a Q&A and wrap up, as well as a couple Q&As mixed in here during this webinar as well. Today, we would like to welcome you, all the SHRM attendees. We'd like to welcome you as this webinar is been collaborated here with HR Professionals Magazine. Today, as you know, you will be receiving 1 hour of SHRM recertification credits, as well as 1 hour of the HRCI recertification credit. As Sanchita mentioned in the housekeeping prior, you will be receiving these credits via email. It should be coming to your inbox, as well as a copy of this Zoom meeting. So please check your spam folders, etc., for those to come. Another note is that you must be present for the entire Zoom meeting to be rewarded your credits. So just to make note of that as well. So within 2 weeks, you'll be receiving that email here. There's going to be a few ways for all of us to interact today on today's Zoom meeting. We're going to have the chat feature, which is probably located either at the bottom or the top of your screen, depending on how you have it set up. And then we always love reactions, whether it's a high five, a heart, thumbs up, just to let everyone know that you're engaged and whatnot. Like I said, feel free to put in the chat any questions that you may have. We do have some time carved out in between certain times within this session for Q&A, and then we will also have a Q&A session at the end of this at the end of this webinar as well. So I hope you guys all enjoyed today's webinar. Have a great day, happy Friday, and have a great weekend. Take it away, Bob.
All right. Thank you so much, Heather. Really appreciate it. And many thanks to you, to Sanchita, to Karen, and everyone who has worked so hard to make this webinar happen. And thank you to all of you in the audience for making time out of your busy day. And I really hope you find this to be a great investment and that you have come away with a number of substantial ideas and tips to carry forward. And as Heather said, we will stop at times for Q&A and have a good amount of time for that at the end. What we'd like to start off with is just to get a little sense of your experience with teams. So we're going to start with a couple of very quick polls. All right. And the first one is to think about a great team that you have been on and what made it great, and select all that apply. We could count on each other, people felt safe to speak up, clear expectations, we got good results, everyone contributed, or other. And feel free to add ideas into the chat if you would like to. So we'll just take a minute for this.
Okay, I think we are closing the polls now. I will display the results.
Okay, so being able to count on each other, clear expectations, getting results, everyone contributed, terrific. And people felt safe to speak up. So these are all really important. And often don't happen, right? So unfortunately, there are times when our teams don't work together so well. So let's do a quick poll on that. So Sanchita, if we can run the second poll. So what about a team that you did not work so well, that you've been on that was not so effective? Why was that? Lack of trust, everyone doing their own thing, poor results, disorganized, unresolved conflict, or other, and feel free to add other items into the chat if you wish to.
Very interesting answers. I can see the poll moving. So
Okay, great. All right. So interesting. The top one seems to be, well, lack of trust and disorganized are the two highest, which is true from my experience. And we're going to be talking about both of those pieces during this presentation. Everyone doing their own thing. For me, that relates to being disorganized, unresolved conflict, and poor team results for sure. And then we did have someone added micromanagement, being micromanaged in the chat. And that, for me, that relates to questions around team leadership. And that's also a piece we're going to touch upon during this webinar. So you are in the right place. So thank you all very much for sharing and giving a sense of your experience with teams. And so, you know, one of the big themes or takeaway, if you will, for today is that a group of people does not automatically become a team, okay? So just having a group of people in the same room, either physical or virtual room, or even working on the same project doesn't automatically make them a real team. And that for real teams, it takes shared intention, effort, a lot of communication. I like to think of it as intention and attention. Um, there will be bumps in the road. There are things that are going to need to deal with as a team and how you work together as a team. And that it's essential to develop and practice great team skills. And it's always a work in progress, but the more progress we can make, the better. And so why is this the case? Has this always been the case? Why is this the case now? So say a couple words about today's workplace. Many of you have heard of the acronym VUCA, V-U-C-A, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And that really speaks to today's workplace in so many ways, that it's complex. There are ambiguous problems. There's a tremendous need for creativity. We're working in person, virtually, hybrid. It's a kind of a new world post the worst of COVID. We're working globally and cross-cultural teams and groups. We need to be able to see a big picture, to see an overview. And perhaps the most important point here to make is that it's beyond the reach of any one individual. We need the creativity of diverse perspectives to really be effective. And you know, drawing on the scholar Scott Page, quoting from a book that he wrote, that scholars from a variety of disciplines have studied how people and groups make breakthroughs, and the common answer is diverse perspectives. Diverse perspectives can lead to creativity and help avoid groupthink. You've all heard the term groupthink, I'm sure, you know, where everyone just goes along to get along, and it's just as if everyone was thinking exactly the same thing, but that's never actually the case. So it takes intention and attention to bring colleagues with different life experiences and perspectives and ideas together. And there are a number of things, as we have already shared, there are a number of things that can go poorly with any team. So let's take a moment to look at those before we get to, okay, what can we do to build great teams? So some of the difficulties, excuse me, I skipped ahead. Some of the difficulties, common performance blocks in weak teams, absence of trust, fear of conflict, and I should say fear of poorly handled conflict. Disagreement and conflict are not necessarily bad, but it's how it's handled. Lack of commitment, avoidance of accountability, inattention to results, maybe sound a little bit familiar from the poll that we did a couple moments ago. And I'm drawing this from Lencioni's The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, which is a very popular way of looking at team issues. It's not the only one, but it's certainly a popular one, right? So that, and one of the things that I hope that you will gain from this webinar is, one, a reminder of the great things you've been doing, but also some ideas for the kinds of things we're going to be talking about to build successful, real successful teams can prevent a lot of problems from happening. It can prevent a lot of um, uh, poorly managed disagreements. It can bring people together and having shared vision of what's going on with the team, right? So that we can prevent a lot of problems and resolve them more easily by doing some of the things that I'm now going to start talking about. And again, I'm giving you an overview now. I'll be getting into some detail on a number of tips and tools. And before we do that, we'll open it up for questions and a bit before then. But there's just a few more points I want to be sure to make now. So keys for successful teams. So we talked about, 5 common dysfunctions of teams. Well, what about keys for successful teams? Now, Google, which, it's a company I'm sure at least a few of you have heard of, did quite substantial internal research into the company in terms of what were qualities of their best teams. And what they came up with were these results: psychological safety, dependability, structure and clarity, work that was meaningful to participants, and work that had impact, being able to see the impact of what was being done. And what was interesting, one of many things that was interesting about this large scale internal research that the company did was that different excellent teams really looked different. So some teams were loud and boisterous and kind of all over the place. Other teams were quiet and were very kind of, ran very, through kind of their um, kind of thoughtful approach. So they ran themselves very differently. That's not what made the difference. What made the difference was these qualities that are on the slide. And of these qualities, the most important one was the one at the top: psychological safety, that people felt safe to be able to speak up. So because that turned out to be, pretty well the most important aspect of the successful teams, I want to say another word about that. What is psychological safety? And this draws on the work of a Harvard business professor, Amy Edmondson. But it's not only Edmondson. There are a lot of folks who are working and writing about the idea. But quoting from an article about Google's teams, building on Amy Edmondson's work, that team members, psychological safety means that team members feel safe to take risks and be vulnerable in front of each other. And that the safer team members feel with one another, the more likely they are to admit mistakes, to partner, and to be willing to take on new roles. So you can see how incredible this can be for a real team and how different this is for just a group of people who haven't truly formed as a real team. Again, towards later on in the presentation, I'm going to be sharing a case study of work that I did along with a colleague with a national organization and the leadership team, and really trying to help them build a sense of psychological safety in their team functioning, which then could have an impact in the rest of the organization. So we'll get to that a little bit later in the presentation. So to really summarize the beginning of this presentation, and we'll take a little break for any questions that there may be. I want to emphasize this point almost as a kind of key summary point of this first section, a key takeaway, right? That how we work together is really important and is often gets overlooked, right? So listen, when I'm talking about real teams, I'm not talking about creating, group therapy sessions, right? Group therapy is wonderful. Nothing against that, right? But that's probably not what we're trying to create in our workplace teams. We have work to do. We have content that we're trying to create. We have goals that we're trying to meet, right? But the point here is that in order to do those great things, we need to pay attention to how we're doing it. What is the process that we're using in order to try to accomplish those great results? And that when we have um, poor team dynamics, those get in the way and slow us down for accomplishing those results. So content and process are important, that we need to consider how we work together along with what we are trying to accomplish. How and what are both really important. And again, most of our intention, whether we're leading a team and whether we're a participant in a team, is going to be around the content. What are the goals that we're trying to accomplish? But paying attention to how we try to achieve those goals will lead us, hopefully, to better results. All right. So before then I move into talking about, tips and tools for building those great real teams, do you have questions at this point? And so please feel free to add them into the chat. And Heather, are you seeing anything?
Not yet. If anyone has any questions, feel free to go ahead and post those in the chat and we'll get them answered for you.
And of course, this first piece has been kind of introductory. And so I realize that many folks may have seen or heard of overview, an overview of effective teams previously. All right, so a couple questions that I'm seeing in the chat. We have a team member who takes forever to make a point, need guidance on how to move it along without her feeling pushed. Thank you for adding that. What a great question. Um, a couple of things come to mind, and obviously we can't get into details here, right? But a couple of things that come quickly to mind that we will be talking about pretty soon are clear expectations about group participation and involving the team itself in developing those expectations. Sometimes in terms of team leads having one-on-one conversations with folks, again, in a very respectful and supportive way, to say something, about really want to hear all your great contributions. And, we do have to sometimes move things along. So how can I help you in terms of making sure that you're able to share in each of our meetings, right? So that's just coming off the top of my head. But we'll be coming to a number of points, I think, that are relevant to that question. And we'll have more Q&A at the end. And I'm happy to do one-on-one follow-ups with anyone who wants to continue the conversation. And you will get my email towards the end. And then another question that's come up, who's primarily responsible for creating this type of team? Everyone on this webinar is primarily responsible. It really is going to depend, I think, on specific situations, but I think you can look at levels of an organization. So in some sense, the team lead certainly has a key responsibility. However, everyone on the team can take responsibility. And that's when one indicator when you've moved from just a group of people to a real team, when everyone in the team is actually involved with talking about, how are we doing as a team? What are we learning that we're doing well? What can we do more effectively? So along with the team lead, everyone on the team, and then let's bring it up a notch to organizational leadership. How are they modeling effective teams? What are they putting out there in terms of encouraging real team building? Paying attention to how the teams work and not only the great results that we're looking for. So, it's a difficult question to respond to in that, pretty much everyone has some responsibility, but in terms of specific situations, can identify maybe who has primary responsibility. Okay. All right, excellent. So please feel free to continue to add questions to the chat. I know Heather is monitoring that. I will monitor it as best as I can. We will absolutely have Q&A again as we move forward. So really happy to have your questions and thoughts as we move forward. So let's go ahead and move into ideas for building real teams, real team building tips. And I see, I'm going to, I just noticed, I'll go ahead and respond to a question in the chat. Will you be sharing these slides with participants? Yes. You will receive the slides and a recording of the presentation within a couple of business days afterwards. So absolutely, they'll be coming back to you. I didn't say it before, but you don't have to copy down all the slides. Just take down some notes of anything in particular that comes up for you as we move through them. So real team building tips. And I'm putting them in 4 categories of tips, if you will. The first one is to intentionally form the team, actually form the team, right? To start moving it from being a group to a real team. I'll of course be saying some more about what that means. Clarify shared expectations and norms so that as much as possible, we're on the same page as a team. Attend to team dynamics and inclusion. All right, so this is really paying attention to how do we work together while we're in team meetings, for instance? And is everyone engaged? Is everyone being included in that process? And learn together and regularly assess how we're doing as a team. And I'll be giving you a couple different perspectives on that learning together piece as we move forward. So these are 4 categories of tips, and clearly there's more than what I'm covering in this fairly brief webinar. But I think this is going to give a good a good 30,000 view perspective on a number of things that can be done to build real teams. And that first one is to intentionally form the team. And it's remarkable, and I'm talking from my own experience working on staff in a variety of places, how often that we can work together with other people for a while and not actually know them, right? And not actually know all the great things that they can offer as a team member. We can work together on projects and not actually take a bit of time to talk about, well, what does this mean to be a team and how can we really work effectively? So intentionally forming the team. So a really interesting study that was published a few years ago in Harvard Business Review, I think speaks to this, where the researchers formed teams to do tasks that they gave them. And one group of teams was instructed to spend some time getting to know each other and the expertise and knowledge that each of the team members were bringing to their team. The other group of teams were just told to get into it and start doing the work. And by far the best performance in this laboratory experiment came from the teams that took the time to inventory their group's knowledge and membership, because then they knew what they each had to offer and for the teams. Whereas the other teams that just jumped into it, it was the loudest voices who constantly kind of manage what the team did for better or worse. And I don't know about you, but that sounds familiar to my own experience a little bit. All right. So taking some time to kind of form the team together, and you can have the team go around and everyone to respond to some questions like this. Here are some possible examples. What skills and experiences are you bringing to the team? What do you want to learn working on this project together as a team? Okay, you may have heard of the next couple questions before. Think of an excellent team you've been on. What made it work so well, right? And now think of teams that did not work so well. What got in the way of these teams being effective, right? So I had you do a kind of an example of this early on in those first couple of polls when we started the webinar. And I hope you can see how having a group come together and really share and making sure that we're hearing from everyone sitting around the table, whether that table is in person or virtual, can be so powerful, can really start to break down some barriers and open up some perspectives between the individuals involved. Some more thoughts about intentionally forming a team. Another kind of cool thing to do is to do an assessment such as DISC. Many of you have heard of this, right? It's a kind of very well-respected personality and preference assessment. And it can be very interesting for individuals to do that and then come together and share their results and talk about how their different perspectives and different approaches to things and different styles can play out in a team, how it's maybe played out in the past, how can it play out here? So again, being very self-aware as a group of who is on the team and how we can work together. Kind of a key point as I finish up this piece that I want to share is that these exercises and discussions that I'm suggesting for forming the team can actually be great to do at any point in the team's progress to continue to grow and improve. So many of the teams that are currently operating right now as we speak have not done these kind of intentional team formation activities. Okay, fine. So take a moment, and whatever a moment means, a team meeting, a couple hour special meeting, an offsite, a retreat, whatever it is, take a little bit of time and do some of these exercises together. And it may lead to some surprises of actually getting to know people that we've been working with that we haven't actually we've missed a lot because we haven't really taken the time to get to know them and form the team. All right, and again, I'm going on, I'm giving you an overview of a lot of tips and tools and ideas. If you have questions and comments, please put them in the chat. We'll be making time for Q&A as we close, get towards the end. But I'm really hoping that we're covering a lot of good ideas, many of which I have no doubt you do, your teams have done, and then maybe several ideas that are you hadn't thought of before, and that might be good to add to your toolkit, to your repertoire of team building ideas. So the next category of team tips I want to share is to clarify shared expectations and norms. All right. And to do this clearly and explicitly. So this helps avoid being disorganized. Everyone kind of doing their own thing because we haven't really talked about what we're doing as a team, right? So clarify shared expectations and norms. And an exercise that I've done with teams is to help them create a team charter, like the team's constitution, if you will. So in the team charter would have 4 categories of things to clarify. Absolutely most important, purpose and goals. Why are we here? What are we supposed to get done? And it's a little bit surprising how often teams are formed and they don't have clear goals. They don't have clear responsibilities. They don't quite know how they're supposed to be contributing to the overall organizational effort. So clear purpose and goals. Clarity around decision making, roles, leadership, who's responsible for what? Are we going to do consensus decision making, or are we going to vote? Or is it going to be the team lead who kind of hears what everyone has to say and then makes decisions? So just to clarify those kind of good things up front. Process and interaction can cover a lot of different things. How are we going to work together? So it can be things like team meetings. Um, when are they going to happen? How do team meetings get organized? How do we create the agendas? What goes on the agenda? How do we run the meetings? Good things like that. Um, if we're working virtually or in a hybrid scenario, how do we manage that? What have we learned from these past few years of doing things like that to make sure that everyone is engaged and included so that we have an inclusive process, including for people who may be remote? Um, um, when do we move from those email or chat discussions to actually having a in-person or video discussion about items? So when do we move from email to having a discussion? Or, alternatively, what do we really need to have those discussions? And what can we do just fine via email? Right? So it goes both directions. But, trying to have some of those kinds of conversations around process and interaction. And again, it may not be possible to do all at the beginning of a team's life, but that's part of paying attention and assessing how we're doing as a team, because things come up and okay, let's take a moment and talk about that and add to our team charter. And then finally, assessment and learning, which is kind of what I was starting to talk about. How in an ongoing way can we assess how we're doing as a team? What are we learning? How can we improve as a team? And what are we doing that's great and we want to continue to do? And this is so important for ongoing teams or for a project team to learn about. And then if we're all going to kind of scatter to the winds and work on different project teams, what can we bring forward to those teams? So shared expectations and norms, such an important part of real teams. All right. Moving to kind of the next category I want to share. Attending to team dynamics and inclusion. All right, so this is really paying attention to how we're working as a team, whether it's in a meeting or in various conversations, right? So here are some things that if you're familiar with group facilitation skills, team dynamics, group dynamics, you may be familiar with some of these things. So paying attention to who's talking and who's not. Okay. What's the mood in the room? And again, whether that's an in-person or a virtual room. Is it calm? Is it tense? Is it upbeat? Are ideas really considered, or are they quickly kind of shot down? Different people have different styles. Sometimes people are really out there and they want to immediately and quickly give their ideas. Other people kind of step back, maybe a little bit more introverted, but they have great things to share. So how are we making sure that everyone's contributing, including those who may kind of step back and process a little bit longer, or who are remote? And it's really easy for people who are remote to kind of disappear into the void, particularly when other folks are meeting in person. So in some sense, my own experience is that hybrid meetings are the most difficult, more difficult than either fully in person or fully remote. But that's just me. How are disagreements being handled? Are we following through on those, our team charter and our agreements on how we're interacting together? How are we handling um, disagreements? And, the catch-all, what else do we notice, right? So this is certainly important for team leads who are often team facilitators. And by the way, the team lead does not need to be the facilitator. That the facilitation role can actually be one that someone else takes on, which can have some potential real advantages of sharing responsibility and allowing the team lead to just be concentrating on what they're hearing and what's going on in the room. Um, but it is not only the team lead or the team facilitator's responsibility. Everyone on the team can pay attention to the team dynamics. And if you've been building, getting closer together as a true team and step by step, bit by bit, building more psychological safety, anyone in the team should be able to point out dynamics that they may be seeing. But again, in a respectful way. So things like, I'm not sure. We've heard from everyone in the group. Can we do a go round and just hear from everyone right now? I'm actually going to be giving you a couple more ideas in a moment. And towards the end of the presentation, which in just a few minutes, I'm going to be sharing a complicated case study of when I worked with a leadership team and really helped them work through tensions and disagreements they were having. And so that then allowed them to work together more effectively as a leadership team, which then trickled down, so to speak, carried through to the rest of the organization. So kind of a key point of this kind of work, right? That by doing the kinds of things we're talking about today, we can prevent a lot of problems from happening and resolve them more easily when they do arise. And I'm noticing a comment, Jerry, thank you. Jerry made the comment, I'm almost at the point where I think it makes more sense for everyone to be virtual rather than hybrid. Um, and I have to say, I agree that either virtual, either totally virtual or totally in person, or both. You can go back and forth. So I've been running for many years a leadership development program for emerging leaders here in Massachusetts, where I'm based. And now that COVID is not as awful as it used to be, although it's still around, we've moved to a hybrid scenario, but it's a hybrid being we meet in person and then we meet virtually and then we meet in person again and then we meet virtually. And we go through that kind of cycle. Whereas when we were doing hybrid meetings, where some people were in person and some people were remote, it just was always the case where the people who were remote did not participate as much. And I was constantly, as facilitator, reaching out to them to participate so that, because the people in the room were all engaged with each other. So I don't know, Jerry, what do you want to, oh, you just noticed you put something else in the chat. Hybrids always start out with the best of intentions, but remote folks end up getting lost. Exactly. That's been my experience too. Now, but on the other hand, I am going to add, if it makes sense for your particular organization or team to do this kind of hybrid meetings where some people are in person, some people are remote, then really think about the kinds of tips that I'm sharing today and more that you can come up with to make sure that there's real inclusion, which is actually where I want to turn to on the next slide. And had another comment. I have a global remote team, meets via Teams once or twice a month. It is very hard. Yeah, and it's probably necessary if it's a global remote team. Yeah, then that kind of in-person and remote setup may be absolutely necessary. Maybe sometime during the year people can come together all in person, but likely you're going to have to do the in-person remote hybrid type of meeting. So really to concentrate. So the kinds of things I'm suggesting in this webinar are almost as important or more important in that kind of scenario to really encourage inclusion. So let me move to the next slide. So here's a couple, just a few kind of tips and ideas for promoting engagement and inclusion. Okay. One is actually make sure there's time on the agenda for discussion. It seems obvious, but so many times we have so much work to do. We're boom, boom, boom through every agenda item, and there's not real time for quality discussion. So building time into our agendas to make sure there's discussion. And may mean maybe we don't have to cover every single point in the meeting. Maybe we can wait till the next meeting so that we can allow time for discussion, right? As I gave you an example in the previous slide, do a go round to hear from everyone, and bring it up. Well, lots of great ideas. We're hearing lots of great ideas in this session, and just really want to make sure that we're hearing from everyone. So let's go around. And you can pass. So if you're not ready to speak, that's okay. But let's go around and give everyone a chance to speak. We will come back. If you pass, we'll come back and give you a second chance. Um, and that can be a good way. So that folks who tend to are maybe more introverted, maybe think about things before speaking, give them a chance to think it through and then kind of come back to them. So give them the opportunity. We can invite someone who hasn't spoken up to do so. I would suggest we need to do that carefully so that we're not embarrassing someone or putting them on the spot. So we can say something like, well, lots of great ideas. Uh, um, Jerry, I'm going to use your name. Jerry, we haven't heard from you. Do you want to share at this point? You don't have to right now, but I just want to make sure that you feel welcome to share if you want to. All right, so we're doing it in a way that's respectful, allows people to do things their way. But again, and I'm noticing in the chat, um, to be careful not to put pressure on the introverts. We want to invite the introverts, but not put pressure on them, but to really make space. I did a team building workshop with cross-cultural teams. And during a break, someone from a culture that's certainly different than the one that I grew up in here in the United States, was saying to me that they had a terrible experience where their cultural background is to really listen, hear what everyone has to say, think about it, and then go away and think about it, and then come back and share. Well, that's what this person tried to do, but when they tried to come back and share, the rest of the team said, "Oh no, we're done. We're ready to move on. We don't need to hear any more ideas." And so that person truly felt shut out of participating in that team. So, everyone can take responsibility. That individual maybe could take some responsibility to share more about how they tend to work in teams. But I think the whole group, the whole team could have done more around building expectations and clarifying expectations about how they were going to work together. So that person was invited and encouraged to participate. Watch out for interruptions and cutting people off. If we're excited and energetic and all that, interruptions can happen. I might jump in a little bit too soon, and that could be fine. And if we have a sense of being a real team, if we have a sense of psychological safety, then it's okay. Someone can kind of come up and say, okay, great. Now give me a chance to speak up. Okay, all right, right. So, but we're paying attention, or if we're facilitating, we're noticing dynamics like that going on. Then again, we can say, okay, everyone, let's be careful and make sure that we're hearing from everyone and not cutting each other off, okay? Um, and then finally, to do a quick evaluation at the end, even if it's for 2 minutes, even as simple as saying, okay, during this meeting, what did we do really well working together as a team? What can we do? What can we improve on so that next meeting it works out better than this? Even if it's really quick, do something like that can be really powerful. And then finally, learning group facilitation skills. It's really valuable and really pay off in the long run. If you've never had training or even read books on group facilitation, it can be really valuable to do. All right, a couple more points I want to make. I want to share a case study and then we'll open it up for Q&A. Learning together. And I was starting to get at this idea of doing assessments. And you may have heard of after-action reviews coming from the US military. And the idea is after a big project, after a big campaign, if you will, take a little bit of space to talk about how it what went well, what could be improved, right? But it's amazing to me how often teams finish a project, even a big complicated project, and right away they're on to the next piece. So kinds of questions you can ask in a debrief, and it doesn't have to take a lot of time, but what were our goals? What did the team achieve? How did the team encourage a collaboration? What did we do really well that we should continue? Or what can we each bring to our next project team if this particular team is not going to continue? And relatedly, what did we learn that we can actually improve on the next team that we do or our next project, right? So even a brief debrief can really make a difference in terms of and it's practice in learning together. Another way to learn together are retreats and offsites, right? So spending a little bit of additional time to do a deep dive. How are we doing as a team? Really to continue to discuss identifying strengths and areas for improvement. Practicing, doing a little bit of training and practicing team skills. If there are communication issues, working on those, addressing challenges, getting to know each other better. It's a great opportunity to do, for instance, do a tool like the DISC and have people kind of come together and share their results and get to know each other a little bit better. And have fun, games, go bowling, have dinner together, do fun things. The one thing I want to say about doing fun things, and I want to be clear, I am not Scrooge, I'm not the Grinch. I like doing fun things on team retreats and offsites and all. The only issue is we can have a great time together, and then how do we bring it back to our day-to-day work together, right? So doing some um, self-aware team activities, and then actually having conversations during the retreat or offsite of what are we learning? What have we been learning together? And how do we bring that back to our work day to day is really important. So yes, have fun, but also talk about how you're going to bring it all back. All right, I was going to do one more poll, but I'm going to actually skip past that and do mention the case study so that we do have a few minutes for Q&A. So I am skipping the poll and moving to the case study, and this is where I'm going to finish up my presentation. So how do you bring all this together? I'm going to give you an example where a colleague and I worked with a national organization. Many people have heard of this organization. And this was a case of leadership team building. We were brought in actually to do work with a team, actually a DEI team. But the more that the leadership got to know us, the more that they really wanted us to work with them. And so we worked with a new executive. It was a brand new executive who wanted to foster a collaborative culture in the organization, starting with the leadership team, because the leadership team did not work together well. This new leader came in and found that the the folks in the leadership group were used to working with the previous long-term executive and competing for that long-term executive's attention, right? So they were actually in competition rather than in cooperation and coordination. So the leaders did not collaborate with each other, and so neither did their departments, neither did their teams collaborate with each other. And yet, what the talk was in the organization was about teams and collaboration. So there was a disconnect between what people said they valued and what they practiced. Okay, so, before I switch to the next slide, give some thought. Well, what would you do if you were the consultant here? What could you do in a scenario like that? And you may come up with great ideas that maybe I wish I had thought of. But here's what we did. Okay. So first of all, we gathered some information. We did interviews with everyone on the leadership team and with a number of folks at different positions in the organization. So we did one-on-one interviews with them, kept the information, everything was anonymous, confidential. We coached the executive to really clarify what their vision was, to really be able to express and communicate what their vision was for a more collaborative leadership team and a more collaborative culture in the organization. We facilitated the leadership team as they discussed this. So they did a 2-day leadership offsite retreat. We shared back the themes from the data that we had collected. Again, maintaining confidentiality, but we're reporting back what we were hearing from them and from others in the organization, again, in an anonymous way. The executive did a terrific job then expressing their vision for the organization and also their frustration of what they were experiencing as they've been working with this new leadership team. After some discussion, so after some really helping them set some new, clarify some new expectation and set some new, new charter, if you will, for how they could work together, one courageous participant spoke up and talked and mentioned about tension long term they had been having with someone else in the room, right? Now that person, because we had set the stage for productive discussion, actually responded pretty well. I mean, they were obviously a little defensive, but they said, yeah, all right, well, here's my perspective on it. And what my colleague and I did in the moment was a on-the-spot conflict resolution facilitation right there in the room, where they were modeling that for the rest of the leadership team. All right, so long story short, what a difference that made for that team. They really then were able to talk about a new vision for themselves as a team, and then how to carry that forward to their own teams and the rest of the organization. So it was a really powerful intervention on any number of ways. All right, so despite my best intentions, I talked too much, but I hope you found it valuable. I hope you found a lot of really interesting things here. And I notice a comment in the question, someone needs to leave, talking about global teams, cross-cultural teams, people coming from different styles, different cultures, different ways of working together. Such an important question and really requires being intentional about respecting and honoring the different cultural styles and experiences that people have, and then how do we work together? So that is absolutely something. If people would want to follow up with me, I'd be happy to continue the conversation. Are there any other comments or questions as we start to wrap up for today? I have just a very brief wrap up to do before we hit close. But I want to just see if there's any other comments or questions that anyone has as we move towards the end of our time together. Okay. So if we were in the same room, I might do a little go round here and say, okay, what are your takeaways from our discussion today? Actually, let me ask that. What are you taking away from this? What are you hearing? Is it anything that has been reinforcing something that you already knew and maybe supported you in taking that to your team? Or is there anything that you have a question about? Or is brand new insight. So any thoughts that anyone wants to share? Right. Yeah. Someone put in the comment, absolutely. Team development requires intentionality. And if, that is, I would hope that's a takeaway that everyone has, that just having a group of people in the same room or even working on the same project, even having worked on the same project for a while, doesn't necessarily make them a true team. Takeaway has been setting purpose and goals at the beginning. Absolutely. And the one thing I would add is if you haven't done it at the beginning, come back to it now during the life of a team. You can blame me. Say, hey, I attended this webinar and he suggested, and actually take a little bit of time during a team meeting, or it's a great idea for an offsite to do some of the things that we were talking about. Um, um, Make the time, in your agenda for each team meeting to clarify what's the purpose of the meeting. What is our agenda? Maybe reach out to the entire team to develop that agenda for the team meeting. Right? So great. Thank you. Someone put in the chat, too numerous to list all the learnings, but use of the disc is a good reminder. Thank you. Absolutely. There are other things out there like the disc, the Myers-Briggs a lot of groups use, but anything like that, there are any number of ways, like who's in the room? What are our different styles and approaches? What are the different kinds of expertise we're bringing so that we all know who we're working with? All right, great. So I have a couple last slides and then we will close up on time. Um, someone put in the chat, I really love what you said about learning together. Really important to become a successful team. And absolutely, teams are a work in progress. Start them off intentionally, come back to them and be intentional during the process, but it's a constant growth process. All right, so real quickly, what we covered, differences between a group and a real team, why the distinction matters so much, common performance blocks, qualities of great teams, key practices to support real team development, inclusion, and effectiveness, and an example of leadership team building. We can help. If you're interested, we can absolutely help with one-on-one and group coaching for team leads, conducting training workshops on a variety of different topics, designing and facilitating retreats and offsites that have an impact, supporting teams at all levels to do things like creating team charters, putting inclusion into practice, assessing team effectiveness, and then finally working with team leadership to enhance a team culture throughout the organization. So just a few of the ways that we can work with you. Feel free to follow up. I've gone pretty quickly, covered a lot of ground. You may very well have questions about how do you apply any of this in your in your teams. So feel free to email me at bgreen@nexalearning.com, and that's green with an E at the end. And I'm happy to just chat and follow up. And also feel free to talk with our Vice President of Organizational Development, Nancy Polsky, at nancy@nexalearning.com. All right. So that is it. How about that? It's 12:30. We're ending on 10. Thank you all so much for your time and attention. Um, um, and the great comments in the chat. And I know it was a whirlwind, but I hope it was a good investment in your time. And there's any number of takeaways that you can now will apply in your teams. And it would be wonderful to stay in touch, and maybe we can follow up from this get together. So thank you again. And at this point, have a great rest of your day, a great weekend, and take care.